Coffee machines can be extremely confusing with so many technologies on the market. And how do you know if you need a heat exchanger, a single boiler, a dual boiler, chronometer, anything of those sorts? In this video, I'm going to go through all the jargon, all the lingo. I'm going to break it down so that your grandma can understand it. And I'm going to make sure that the next time you go to buy a coffee machine, you're going to know exactly what's important to you and the way that you drink it. So let's check it out. Now, I can't possibly go through all the different things in the entire coffee machine because there's just too many, and I don't want to make this video that long. However, I might make a part 2 if you think this is valuable. And if anything I missed in this video, please pop it in the comment section below. Let the other people who are watching this video know what other things they might be interested in, whether it might be important to them. And also, if you haven't liked this video and subscribed, please do so. Thanks a lot, you bloody legends. So firstly, let's start with some of the most common boiler types, because they're the ones that you're probably going to be most interested in, depending on what's important to you. So there are 4 main designs, and the first one I'm going to talk about is called a heat exchanger. So what does that mean exactly? Well, it's got a boiler that heats up all the water in it to the temperature of your steam, so about that 130 degrees Celsius. And in the middle of that is this pipe that comes up and it goes right to where you extract your coffee. And it's connected directly to your cold water reservoir. So as the water comes through that and passes through this boiler filled with burning hot water, it transfers or exchanges the heat into that tube so that by the time it gets to the extraction point, it's about that 95 degrees Celsius, which is sort of perfect for where you want to extract coffee at. And why the heat exchange boiler system is so good is because it allows you to do both steaming milk and extracting coffee simultaneously, which is fantastic if you're making multiple coffees in a row and you have to do them both. And if you get good, you can balance the steam one on there and do your milk whilst you're extracting your coffees. So they're very handy for that reason. And it's a boiler type that's been around for years. It's really easy to maintain. Mechanics love it. So it's one of those machines that'll just last and last and last forever. But there are a few downsides that I'll go into in a minute. Some examples of heat exchange machines are the Apartamento by Rocket, a Profitex Pro 500, also the ECM Mechanicas. These are great heat exchange machines that should last you forever. Now, a single boiler is similar to a heat exchange in that it has one boiler that's boiling up your water, but it doesn't have the tube running through it. It actually just has 2 tubes that run out, one going to your steam one and one going to your extraction point. So when you turn it on, the water will boil up to your brew temperature around that 95 degrees. And if you want to steam milk, you have to flick a switch, and that tells the boiler to start going to the 130 degrees Celsius. So there's a bit of a wait between your extraction and your steam. And that can be annoying for some because it means you have to wait between making your shots and then steaming your milk. And especially if you're making multiple coffees, when you want to turn it back to extraction, you've got to wait a couple of minutes for it to cool down again, then wait a couple of minutes more to wait for it to heat up again. So it's very laborsome. Although you have to wait between steaming and extracting, it is cheaper usually to have a single boiler. And that's why some of the lower end machines have that style. And also, if you're drinking mostly black coffees as well, you don't really need to worry about steaming milk that often. That makes a single boiler much more cost effective for you. So some of the single boilers to look at are obviously the world famous Rancilio Silvia, just a classic, it's been around the longest. The Gaggia Pro, you also have your Profitec Goes and ECM Casa as well. They're all ones that are just, you have to flick a switch and wait between it, but it's up to you whether you're patient or not. Now there's the dual boilers, which you probably guessed are 2 boilers, one dedicated to this brew and one dedicated to your steamer. And this means that you can do both at the same time, but you have a lot more accuracy in both those temperatures, and the speed in which they get to those temperatures are a lot quicker than, say, your heat exchange machines. The downside is that they are a lot bigger because they have 2 boilers. They are actually physically bigger. They are also more expensive, and some people say they're harder to maintain, more parts, more costly. And obviously you're running 2 boilers simultaneously, so that's going to chew up more energy. However, a lot of the more modern dual boilers actually have the ability to turn off the steam boiler. So if you're making mostly espresso-based drinks, then you can turn off the steam boiler and then turn it on when you need to make a steam. But if you're never going to use the steamer, then it's probably more effective to just buy a single boiler. Examples of the dual boilers are the Profitec 600s, the Lele Biancas, La Marzocco Linea Minis. They are great machines that all have dual boilers. Even the Breville dual boilers are good at making coffees, just not at lasting a very long time. The last design is called thermoblock design, and what that is a block of usually a steel that then has coils going through it, little tubes, and that pumps through cold water, and as it travels through there, the heated block heats up that water instantly, and it delivers hot water or hot steam almost instantly. And it's a lot more cost effective because you're not constantly heating this massive amount of water. You're only delivering the water that you need, but it does vary in temperatures and it's not always the most accurate. But some machines actually have dual thermoblocks, so that means there's one dedicated to your brew, one dedicated to your steam, and that makes it a lot easier because when it's just one that's having to deliver steam and then extract coffees, then you are going to get some variance in the level of temperature. The other thing to note is that they drastically vary in the quality of thermoblocks. So some machines like the Decence DE1 is a fantastic design. It's also very, very smart. It can deliver hot water all over the right place as you need it, as down to the most precise numbers from 80 degrees up to 99 degrees, sine wave, whatever you want. But those are very different to, say, the ones that are in your Breville Bambinos, which are pretty basic ones and aren't going to be the most powerful for your steamer and things like that. Other types of machines are the Escasso Duos and the Unos. And speaking of temperatures, what about the word PID? Well, it's actually pronounced PID, and don't worry, Grandma, it doesn't mean pelvic inflammatory disease, so it doesn't matter if your machine comes with that. It actually stands for proportional integral derivative, which is a fancy way of saying a digital temperature controller for your boiler. So whenever you see a machine that has a PID or a PID on it, that means there's an extra level of control over your temperatures, because what happens with, say, a heat exchange machine or a single boiler, it's kind of like your oven. It'll heat up to the point where you need it to, but then the element will sort of switch off and it'll start to cool down, and then it'll heat up again and it'll cool down again, heat up again and cool down again. And that variance, whilst it might only be 5 or 10 degrees, can be the difference between you making a really sour coffee and a really burnt bitter coffee. And because coffee is very sensitive, adding in a PID means that that temperature doesn't move more than, say, 0.5 degrees, maybe maximum 1 degrees. So you get a lot more accuracy, which means the coffee is going to taste the same, always nicely extracted to that level. And often machines with the PIDs, not all of them, but often they will have the temperature control. So you can actually set the temperature of your steam or your brew boiler, depending on if it's a dual boiler or a single boiler. If you set it to, say, 93 degrees Celsius, that's really good for, say, your dark roasts. And if you, say, are putting in light roast or medium roast, you might want to go to 95 to 98 degrees because the density of the bean is a lot higher, and therefore you need that hotter, otherwise you'll end up with some sour tasting coffees. But again, that's a bit more advanced and probably not what everyone needs, but just know that if you're making maybe 2 or 3 coffees in a row, the PID just gives you that temperature stability. And if you don't buy a coffee machine with a PID, like the Ranchilla Silvia, just make sure that you understand how to temperature surf. Because of that thing called the hysteresis, which is the temperature going up and down like a little wave, when your boiler gets too hot, you don't want that touching your coffee because that's just going to burn it. So you always need to flush that coffee. If in the heat exchange machines, I said that one of the downsides is that tube, the idle water sitting in that tube can get super hot and can be over 100 degrees. That's going to burn your coffee. Make sure you always flush the water first until you see all of the bubbling, gurgling water shooting out of the group head. Make sure that that's all gone first and it settles down, and then make your extraction. So a PID is a little bit on the nerdy side. However, most of you will be using it even if you're making milk-based coffees. It just is that temperature regulator. Machines like the Lelit Anna PID, Profitec Pro 400 to 600, I think they all have the PIDs in them, ECM, Synchronicas, even the Bazera Magicas. If they say the word PID, that's what you want to look for. Group heads. Well, okay. Now, there are 2 or 3 different types of group heads. And as you can see here, this is what a group head, that is what I'm talking about when I talk about a group head. Now, the most common one is the E61 group head. That's been around since, you guessed it, 1961. And it is still used to this day, even though the technology has slightly advanced. The basic mechanics of it still remain the same. So at the front there, you've got that massive, what looks like an upside down tuber. It's a big chunk of metal, normally brass, and then a thermosiphon coil that helps connect it to the boiler. So as the water comes up, it goes around that thermosiphon and then delivers temperature to that group head, making that nice and hot, which heats up your portafilter and usually gives you a decent amount of temperature control. It's not perfect, but it's very easy to maintain. They last forever, and that's why they're so popular today. Now, the downside to having an E61 group head is that they can get extremely hot to touch on the front, and that big chunk of metal, even though it has a little sticker on it saying do not touch, the amount of times I've burnt myself on that just reaching across it or something like that, I can't even count how many times, but that's just something to be aware of. Those are hot, and that may or may not be a deal breaker for you. Most people get over it, so it's not the end of the world, but just so you know, that is one of the reasons I would say I wouldn't go with an E61 group head. The other common thing is often, as I said before, is that these group heads, they boil up and they overheat, and any idle water sitting in there will burn your coffee, so you must flush them. The machines that have these are the Profitec 400, 500, 600, ECM, Mechanica, Synchronica, Laylit, Mara X. There's all of those machines have this style, and they're very easily recognizable. Not all of them that have that upside down tuber are an E61, but they're usually an E61 style. The other downside to the E61 group head is that it takes forever to heat up. So you're looking at about 45 minutes for a single boiler or a heat exchanger machine to heat up to that level. So just be aware, some people with impatience, they will not want to wait 45 minutes. You can get yourself a timer on the wall and have it turn on 45 minutes before you wake up. But even though your boiler might be ready in 10 to 15 minutes, that chunk of metal at the front is going to take another 10 to 15 minutes to warm up before you're ready to make your coffee. You may be able to make one coffee, but if you sooner go to make the second coffee, it's going to be very sour because all that heat's been detracted from the metal and gone into heating your coffee. So yeah, might be something that's worth looking into depending on how much your patience is. Okay, so what other options are there? Well, there's the saturated group head. This is a saturated group head here on the Synesso. So one of the greatest things about the saturated group heads is that it's much quicker. It's about half the amount of time to heat up because that water is going straight to your group head and that's fully saturated. That's why it's called saturated. And that just makes it a lot more stable. You're getting a much better delivery of water and the temperature is much quicker to heat up. And also, many of the saturated group heads are covered, so you won't actually burn yourself. I love this Nesso MVP Hydra because it's completely above it. They are warm, but they're not burning hot. Other examples of fully saturated group heads are La Marzocco Linea Mini, the Nesso MVP Hydra, I said that one already. The Slayer single group, that's another one. So there's a lot out there, but they're usually in the higher end models. Now, the other type is called directly heated or active heated group heads, when they actually have a special electrical, like a little electric warm blanket that wraps around the group head that turns on as soon as you turn on the machine. And that means that you can cut the time to heat up down to like 3 to 10 minutes. So machines like the Decent DE1, the Smeg Mini Pro, the Profitec Move, they all have actively heated group heads. And also they are very, very stable. Obviously, there's no fluctuation whatsoever because the electronically heated group head will mean that you get that consistent temperature throughout the day. There's also the size of your group head. 58 mil is a standard size. 54 mil is a little bit smaller, and 51, and then you've got your 49s and things like that. Now, just if you can get 58 mil, and the reason I say that is because whilst it may not be the best, it is definitely the standard. But when you have a 58 mil machine, you'll be able to buy the tamper, you'll be able to puck screens, you'll be able to buy different baskets. It just makes it much easier than staying away from, say, 54 mil, which is more of the home appliance end of the size of portafilters. All right, pre-infusion. Pre-infusion is the modern term that's used to describe before you start your full extraction, you actually let the hot water, so the same temperature as the normal water, but without any of that pump pressure, trickle onto the top of your puck, onto your coffee bed, and that helps expand all of your coffee molecules. It releases some of the gases that you don't really want, like the carbon dioxide, which can make it quite sour tasting. And it also has a secondary effect, which is it evens it out. Because each of those granules expand, any granules that aren't the same size will fill all those space, and you won't get what's called a channel, where water will find its pathway through one area and over extract that area. And this is another word for blooming. And it's often used if you have really, really fresh coffee that's filled with carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide can be really sour in your cup. Then by adding a bit of pre-infusion and varying length, so it could be 4, it could be 10 seconds of pre-infusion, that'll just allow that coffee to settle down, some of the CO2 escapes, and then when you hit it with the full bar pressure, 9 bars, then you're not going to get all of that sourness in your cup. Why it's useful for also expanding your puck is that maybe you've even unevenly tamped, maybe your grinder isn't that great, maybe you haven't gotten rid of the fines, enough of the fines, so there's a lot of variance in the granule size, and that just make these channels, and you don't want water to go through different paths. You want it to be as evenly going through the entire puck as possible, because if it goes through all the different channels, then it's kind of like inviting everyone over to have a party in your mouth and they're all throwing up different types of drinks. It's not very fun. It's very unbalanced. However, it is still quite experimental, and so I wouldn't say get into it. I'd just say maybe add 4 seconds if your coffee is nice and fresh. Just give it a 4-second pre-infusion bump. It's probably all you need. But if you want to get into it, you can, take it up. People do like minute-long pre-infusions and experiment with all different types of things, and you end up getting different flavors in your cup. If you're drinking a black coffee and you love your black coffees, then that's a really great way to experiment with different flavors, because pre-infusion drastically affects the black coffee. But when you're adding milk in, just a simple 4 seconds, or even just turning off your pre-infusion, it might even be easier for you. But just remember, you get yourself a nice grinder and obviously tamp correctly. Now, here's some benefits with the E61 group heads, is that they all come with a mechanical pre-infusion. This was accidentally discovered. They didn't really intend to do pre-infusion. But what they realized is that because the E61 has a mechanical lever on the side to open up the line, if you pull it up halfway, it just opens the line of water so that it trickles and doesn't activate the pump. And then you can pull it up fully when you're ready to activate the pump, and then you'll get your full bars of pressure. Now, here's something to remember as well if you have a shot timer or you don't have a shot timer. If you're timing your coffees and you're aiming for that, say, 27 seconds, this is something that gets asked a lot, you have to add the pre-infusion onto that time. So if you're getting 27 seconds in total and you're doing a 6-second pre-infusion, that means that your coffee is only extracting for 21 seconds, and that's probably going to be under extracted. So 27 to 35 seconds is what you want to aim for. Add pre-infusion to that. So if you've got 4 seconds more, you're wanting to go from 31 to 39. All the machines that have E61 group heads have a built-in mechanical pre-infusion. You also have machines like the Decent, they can do pre-infusion, La Marzocco Mini, Smeg Mini Pro. Lots of machines have pre-infusion these days, so just look out for that word. There's 2 types of pumps as well. There's a vibratory pump, which sounds like a rude word, and it does just that, vibrates. And there's the rotary pumps. Now, majority of machines will have vibratory pumps in it just because they're cheaper. They're very easy and compact to use, so they'll be in the majority of machines. In some of the high-end machines, you'll find the rotary pumps. The difference is the vibratory pump will just make that sort of brr, 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 brr sound as it vibrates and pumps through the water or the steam. And it can be a bit noisy, and the rotary pump is definitely quiet. It just hums, purrs like a little pussycat. However, they're for high-end machines, and unless you're really wanting to have that quietness, most people will just get over the noise. It's just something that we deal with, and everything makes noise. Like your grinder will be probably noisier than the vibratory pump anyway. But also, if you're wanting to directly plumb in your machine, then you need a rotary pump. The vibratory pumps don't really do that. So yeah, that might be a reason why you want to go with the higher end models. For the low end models, you've got like your Rancilio Silvia, your Gadget, you've got your Profitec Pro 400s, 500s, your ECM. For the rotary pumps, you've got your ECM Synchronicas, you've got your La Marzocco Minis, you've got your Profitec 700s. So yeah, they're a lot more expensive, and that's just one of the reasons why. Okay, flow control and pressure profiling. These are pretty advanced techniques, and you're probably never going to be looking at machines like this on your first or second machine. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just know that if you're wanting to dive deep into the rabbit hole of espresso, then flow control and pressure profiling, although they have a similar effect on the extraction, they're not exactly the same. Flow control actually is about the water flowing onto this, so how many mils of water per second onto your puck, whereas pressure profiling is affecting your pressure on your pump. Usually the flow control is through a needle valve and is more at the front end, so like that pre-infusion stage, whereas the pressure profiling is more like, I guess, mimicking a lever machine. If you've ever pulled down a lever machine, you release it, that pressure will go back up, and at the tail end of your extraction, that pressure, which might be sitting at 9 bars, will slowly drop down like a nice curve over time and end up at 0. So that's the differences, but they have different effects, and the machine like the Decent can do both of those, and it can do a whole lot more. And if you're getting into that level of coffee technique, then you're wanting to be budgeting, you know, around $6,000 to $10,000 for a machine that can do all of that. If you're looking at just, say, upgrading an E61 group head machine, they can easily be modded with a flow controller, which lets you play around with the rate of water hitting your puck, which can also give you similar types of extractions that a pressure profiling might, maybe not as full control, but definitely something along those lines to help you experiment with different flavors of different coffees. Like I said, there's so many more things that I could go into, like overpressure valves and things like the eco modes and all different types of things that are specific to every machine. However, I think there are the most common questions that I get about what type of espresso machine to buy. So as I said before, there's a ton of different other technologies, keywords that are in almost every other machine, and this video is already long enough, so I don't want to keep you any more longer. But if you did like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks a lot. And if you have any comments or questions, pop them below, because I may do a part 2 if this is a good video for you guys about helping you make the right choices for your machine. I'm very passionate about this, as you can see. Anyway, I hope you love this video. I'm Ride, your coffee coach, and as always, enjoy your brew.